sort of try to accommodate that, but it does cause a lot of issues. So we were wondering, what do you guys think? How do you guys think that mental illness and disabilities are stigmatized? Really?
I don't like personally see any stigmatizing of disabilities. The only thing I see is like people saying like there are people that need help. Like if you have PTSD, you can't just live on your own without like medication or therapy or both, because that's really, really hard to do. So people saying like, you know, if you need help, get help. I don't see anyone going like, you have PTSD, I guess you're a bad person. Or like, I guess you should be put in a cell where you're constantly monitored. So I don't see any like serious stigmatizing of disabled people, just like pushing for them to get help that they need.
No, but also on that, like certain mental disorders, like let's say OCD, like people are like, oh, it's always about cleanliness or whatever, when it's more about like compulsions.
Yeah.
And it just has these like miscommunications about what it actually is. And also like the poster that Anna Landre was talking about, where it was like, what's your excuse? And it was just like, it was just showing this disabled person as like part of this motivational thing when she didn't believe that was like something that should be happening. So I think that is like part of the stigmatization.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to add that she actually wasn't able to get the help that she needed. She graduated from like this top school, and I forgot where it was from, but she graduated from this top school, and she was worried about people helping her go to the bathroom. That's how, and that's kind of just how sad it is to
And
see.
do you sometimes feel like mental disorders are often overlooked because you can't see them as opposed to other physical disability even? Where you can actually see it?
Maybe. There's a lot of misconceptions about it. I don't think there's as many stigmatizations, but if you had someone say like, oh, I have multiple personality disorder, as it's usually regarded, it's dissociative identity disorder, not a lot of people are gonna know what exactly that is or how it's caused, because there's definitely a lot of misconceptions on that.
Yeah, and also like on what Miss Kim was saying, I think it's a lot of times you could be like, oh, well, you look the same and you act the same, so like you're this way. Like, let's say like a transgendered person, their gender expression, like their gender expression was male, but they're really female. A lot of people can be like, oh, you're not female, like you look male, or like you are male, like biologically, and that could have to do with like what you were saying about how like you can't see the disability, so you just don't accommodate that into your thinking.
Sorry, Nina?
I don't think we can really discuss like gender identity and mix that with mental disorders, because I feel like they're two very different things.
They are very different things, but it's just we're kind of connecting it into one big thing. How these things are viewed, I suppose, and how they could be stigmatized. This is just a generalization.
Yeah.
But we're just grouping it into that. That's it.
What do you have to say?
I think there's one disorder like that. There's a lot of like stigmas about. I forgot what it's called. Like where someone has multiple personalities. It's
Dissociative identity disorder.
Dissociative
Yeah.
identity,
Also, I want to add that there's gender dysphoria, which is a thing which often comes with why people.
So could you repeat just quickly how you connected that to mouse?
So a lot of times in mouse you can see, especially in Vladek, the effects of PTSD and how he acts. So a lot of times you can see this in the interactions with his family, especially with like Art or with Mala, because Mala will get mad at him because he is a certain way, like he's collecting things off the street and she's like, you could buy that, or Art's like, you can buy that, and it just stresses them out that he doesn't think the same way that they do, so it just creates like this disconnection.
There's also the fact that Mala has PTSD too, and I guess you could kind of say that people who have mental illnesses might not also be able to understand each other because there's just so many different ways that they can deal with it.
And it looks differently in two different people. Too.
Yeah.
I just going back to the original prompt, don't really notice much stigmatization of disabilities. I mean, if people think differently about them, there's still the argument that one person like doesn't have an arm, and that does like no matter how much you deal with it, that is always inherently going to be a difference. So what I notice is like it's never going to be possible to get people to stop noticing that somebody looks a certain way or is a certain way, but I don't think at least in my personal experience, people have been treated super differently because of their disability. Now, whether they've been, treated differently because of the way that they're forced to live because of it, I think is different than the innate different or preferential or unpreferential treatment of their, direct disability, as opposed to, the consequences of it.
So do you guys know anybody, or like any situation where you know someone with like a mental illness or disability, and like how have you seen it affect their daily life? Like, as we see with Anna Landre, she had to like apply for help, because she's doing very well, so she has to like prove the fact that she needs help, and just like this proving of her need of help is just like a lot of times like affecting her daily life and affecting how she's living. Like, it seems that she has to try twice as hard as like a normal person would.
So, if a person is disabled but has succeeded to a point where they are ahead of another person who is disabled, shouldn't we give the person who's less ahead more compensation and an easier time? Because if we're giving someone who has like bipolar disorder the same handicap pass as someone who's like quadriplegic, like that doesn't make sense. So it should be harder for some people who are less disabled, because there is a degree of being disabled, because it's a lot different if you're missing a finger versus like missing both your legs.
I agree with you, but I think what she meant by well is that she's just doing well in school. So.
Well, yeah, but if they have the ability to succeed in their studies and in their life, then they are still more capable of surviving without extra help. So it should be.
Or maybe a different type of help, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of like the difference between equality and equity, right?
Yeah.
Where equality is giving everyone the same boost,
Yeah.
but not everyone needs the same type of boost,
Yeah.
right? Whereas equity is this idea of we're trying to fill this person's needs in their unique way, right?
Yeah, it's definitely harder to achieve equity than it is equality. It's a longer path, but in the end, it does more good than equality does.
And also like what I was saying about this specific college sophomore is that like she had to prove that she still needed her help, and that was a lot of like the issue with her case, is that like she had to work like really hard to prove that she still needed help. So I agree with you about how like equity should be regarded more, but it also could cause some issues with the fact that like you have to prove something that you don't know how to prove.
Okay, last comment, Alyssa.
Well, I agree with whatever the sophomore name is, about the point where she had to like prove her disability. But like also, if the system didn't have a part where you had to prove your disability and you could just go up and be like, I have mental disability, like I need help, and they had to give you help, a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but like enough people would do that just for the help that it would make it a faulty system. So I feel like it's better to have that. It's better to have that in place than have nothing in place. Obviously, it's not perfect, but like it's better than like not having it.
Yeah.
Okay, one more comment, just because we do have to move on.
Juliana, since you
I completely agree with what Alyssa was saying. Like, I know if you go to Universal Studios, you can get a front of the line pass if you say you have a physical disability and you can't prove, and you don't have to prove to them what it is. And I personally know a couple of people who have definitely abused that by saying like, oh, my foot hurts, like I should have a front of the line pass, and maybe taking away that opportunity from people who actually need it. So I believe that there definitely does need to be some kind of proving system in there to keep people from abusing it like that.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I agree with a lot of you guys, because without that system, then we'd have a lot of people abusing power, so I think it's better that that's in place. But there's definitely some ways that we could improve it. Do you guys have any ideas of how we could improve that system maybe? Because Anna was someone who's actually physically in a wheelchair, and she still had to prove what she needed to do.
I feel like maybe, I know this can definitely be abused, but another step would be maybe like a doctor's note or something from a trained professional who knows disabilities and knows what people need.
Right, or a psychiatrist.
But on that, do you guys think that we should be changing systems just because of a few bad people, rather than changing it to make it easier for those who actually need it? Like, do you think we should be changing it just because that situation could arise, instead of just like making it better for those who do need it and just hoping nobody takes advantage?
Making it like there aren't like you don't have to someone doesn't have to prove their disability. Like with like the rise of people like kind of faking it, I think that would definitely make it harder for people who actually do have the disability to get help, because there would probably be like too many requests for them actually all to have assistance. So just like by keeping it like where they have to prove something, I think that actually makes it easier for them in the long run.
I think also if you have like more specifically a physical disability, most of the time it's obvious, like you're in a wheelchair, or if you broke your leg, you have a cast, you know, and it's easy to see, oh, that person has a broken leg, that can be considered a physical disability, so therefore I should give the front of the line pass to them. Or if someone just walks up with like, I don't know, like a little like brace almost, that like, yes, that is a physical disability, but I don't think you having sprained your wrist a month ago, like, means that you should get a front of the line pass.
But let's say like someone was to put on a fake cast, like if that situation were to happen, should we accommodate this, the system just in case like that situation would arise? Or should they keep it the way it is and just hope that like nobody will take advantage of it that way?
Well, I think if people started like, if someone walked up to me and if I was an employee at, let's say, an amusement park, this is a good example, and they were like, oh, my foot's broken, and I would, if I was like trying to educate my employees about how to deal with people maybe faking this, and I would just tell them, ask them a bunch of questions, because if you really have been like in a event that is like broken your leg, you would know all these sorts of things about how you broke it, like what your doctor said to do, like what specific break you were at, like what specific break you had, as opposed to if you faked it, you might not know a lot of the stuff that you would know coming from a doctor.
So I'm gonna move on. So we will revisit this. So let me just move on for the sake of it. That was actually a really good article that I got actually, because it kind of brings up a lot of the questions of how to fix the current problem, right? Okay, so if you guys could do me a favor and turn in your current event, just put it in the middle. Make sure your name is on it, or both your names are on it if you work in the partner.
Yeah,
I think
And put it right in the middle.
one type of question. I think that type of complex.
I know, where do I put my current code? Liam, did I give you first?
What?
Where did the current event go?
Okay, so I'm gonna have us do a quick little warm up. Okay? Before we do mouse, before we go into mouse, I want to show you guys a different comic. Has anyone watched Watchmen or heard of Watchmen?
And read Watchmen.
Okay, and read or watched. So it's by the DC Comics published it. You guys know who else? What are some other things that are DC? What? Superman,
Arrow.
Wonder Woman.
Aquaman.
Yeah. Okay. So there are multiple chapters. Okay. This is chapter 3, and you guys don't have to know the plot at all. Okay. But here's what I do want you to focus on. Okay. If you look, there are different types of text in these panels. Okay. Let me identify it for you, and I want you guys to see what their relationship with each other looks like. Okay. So you wouldn't know this because it's cut off, but this right here, this, and this, a boy is next. So if you look, right, this man, he's putting up a sign, and there's a boy who's kind of near there, and he's reading a pirate that in mind. And then this one, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory because I'm a news vendor, so he's a news vendor who's kind of looking at what this man is posting up. So here is my question. I want you to analyze every detail of the text here. And I mean everything. And I mean even something up to this and this, okay? And I want you to see what is the relationship between the texts that are in each panel. Why is the boy reading this part of the pirate novel? And how does that, what's the dynamic and relationship with that to this panel? And so on and so forth. And what are some things that you guys can gather about the setting, maybe, about just what's going on, like how this novel is set up, okay? I want you guys to see how the text is at play here. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds just to soak it all in first, okay? 30 seconds, look at it. I'm gonna have you guys discuss it and then we'll discuss it. Okay, just take a look at this right now. So much is being said with not a whole lot.
Yeah, I can't read it.
Make it bigger, you said?
Yeah.
I just pulled it.
It's not posted.
Oh wait, see in the corner under share, can you press the up button?
This one?
No.
Arrow on
Yeah,
different side.
that'll make the cover.
Oh, nice. Okay. So again, take note of the setting, the political climate, maybe the people, what's happening here. If you want to move, Aiden, you can move it. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a few minutes. Share what you noticed in your tables. Okay, I'll give you about 3 minutes. Share what you noticed in your tables.
The text is that refers to the nuclear It says he's on the hub, it's the black sail, and I guess the yellow in the skies. Because the black is like the flag that the nuclear sign is yellow. But it's not in color. I don't know why I'm also, black sail, there's the sky, that's like, so this is the pirates of the race on flag nuclear warheads. The action you guys on. It's good. Yeah. It's like if you look to, do you do transfer?
So you're saying try to measure the power level over, dumbbell rows or
Yeah, you have to extend that. It's dumbbell range extend. Get the full up. Bench high. After like, I can do a solid like
I feel like
Okay, let's kind of bring it back here.
It's like he's reading and then it's like that problem.
Alright, some obvious things. Okay? Do we know where the setting is? Where is it? Yeah.
I'm guessing Cold War Russia because nukes is more heavily, or a big part of the Cold War, and especially Russia was a part of that.
So you think this is taking place in Russia?
Well, not in Russia.
Okay, but that's the political climate. That's what's happening. Yes.
Yes.
But where do you think this is taking place right now? From small details. Let go.
I'm gonna say there's a news vendor and fallout shelters, also a missing person poster on the wall. So because that there's a news vendor, those in that time were only in the major metropolitan cities, which would also make sense because that's where they set up a lot of fallout shelters during the Cold War.
Okay, good.
So I would say probably in New York, just because of the slang that the news vendors using.
I mean, you use so many more connections to come to that conclusion. I'm so impressed. But even if you look at his jacket, there's like an apple and there's an NY, right? So yeah. So even something like that. Yeah. So even something, and again, he could be wearing a New York jacket. But if you really think about realistically why the author kind of puts that there, it's to show you where it's at. But that was actually very impressive. Okay.
Oh, it's right on the right.
Let's now go with this pirate novel. What does that do? Yeah, this is a random boy. He's reading this pirate novel that has nothing to do with what's going on. He has like an innocence about it. But why? Like, what does it add to this? Yeah.
Well, personally, I think it is because he reads about how like the Hellbound ship's black sails against the yellow Indian skies. I think that's referring to like the nuclear sign and the fallout shelter thing because that's what it is and that's what it resembles.
If this were in color, that's probably what it would be. Yeah.
I think it has a lot about showing the ignorance of how the news vendor is. Like he's like, I'm informed on the situation, like we should nuke them. But like on the actual like pirate reading, it's talking about how like they're yelling more blood and how they see like this violent situation, and it's just like the news vendor thinks he understands, but he really doesn't understand what it's like to be in that situation.
Okay, so I just want to let you know these are two different voices, right? So this is the voice of a little boy, and this is the voice of the news vendor. But yes, it kind of adds to the ignorance and the tension of what's happening, of the people's sentiment, right? Alyssa?
I think if this was like a movie or something, you'd have the dude putting up the sign, and like in the background there'd be like someone talking, or like a song or something.
Yes.
And I feel like the pirate novel was like that, and so I think it's like making like suspense.
Creating suspense, absolutely, and tension. What feel do we get, and even touch upon it, but what feel do we get about this news vendor giving his 2 cents? Then what do we feel the public sentiment is about Russia and this whole nuclear scare and the fallout? Like what do we know about the public's reaction to this? Not everyone, but just Aleko and intro.
Either a lot of people, so I would say it's probably split half and half. Half of the people want to just get it over with and nuclear bomb Russia.
Yeah.
But then I feel like the other half could be represented by the person who's just putting the sign up on the wall. Like we don't hear him giving any input at all. But he's also like putting up a sign, like preparing for the worst. So I think that represents the other part of the population that wouldn't want to like directly cause a conflict like that, but wants to be prepared just in case.
Okay, yeah, Charles?
Well, mostly what Aleko said, but also just maybe that missing writer poster kind of means that like some people like are kind of just leaving and they don't want like to have anything to do with it. Because I don't know what the context of that poster is or anything, but like maybe he just left the city and is just like hiding out somewhere.
Well, you know what? I'm actually glad you brought that up. This is part of now the actual plot of the story of Watchmen, right? But it gives you like almost like an intel of what's to come. There's gonna be someone that's missing that they're all gonna look to find. But just even in these first 3 panels, right? you get so much, whereas if you're reading a book, you have to say all of this stuff, right? You have to somehow write it, but we have a lot of text image here, where we already know where it's taking place, what's happening in the world, right? The sentiment of the people. We can almost hear it, the hustle bustle of New York City and this man yelling out and this boy reading. We can almost imagine it, right? And so even when you guys are looking at Mouse, take into consideration all the details that are put in the page, because as you can see, it's all purposeful. Even this poster on the side that you so easily can miss, it's like a foreshadow of what's actually happening in the plot of the story, right? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Take out Mouse, go to page 83. 83 in Mouse.
I have
Okay, June first.
Yes, you.
Can I go get my book?
You know, I Go to page 83, which is the panel.
No, it's actually February 9th.
No.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, sorry, January 24th.
Alright, Megan, where's your book?
I didn't have my book. I don't have my book with me. I can
What
look
could
it up.
Or can you share with Anita?
What page is it? June 12th.
Okay, so before you do anything, okay, before you analyze, here are some guiding questions that I want you to ask yourself as you're analyzing this page. So Julia, can I have you read the first three?
I can't really read
You
that.
can't really read it?
Sorry.
No.
Okay. How is the page organized? Is the panel order obvious, and how do you know the intended order? Are the panels and borders uniform in shape and size, or do they vary? If they vary, how? And how does this affect the meaning?
Okay, Josh, if you read the next three.
Is the style cartoonish, abstract, photorealistic, etc.? What does that tell you about the world the creator is depicting? Are there backgrounds? If so, are they detailed or schematic?
You guys know what schematic is? Can someone look it up? What is schematic?
What is what?
Schematic. If it says, are there backgrounds, is it detailed or schematic? What can you
Of a
assume?
diagram or other representation symbolic and simplified.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so it's something that's not maybe less literal, right? But it kind of represents something else, maybe more symbolic. Last three, Benji.
Last three, okay. Are there backgrounds?
Or sorry, the last two right here.
Okay. Does the point of view remain constant, or does it vary? If so, how? Does the art focus your attention on particular actions? How?
Okay. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes. Okay? 2 minutes. I'm gonna leave these questions up here. Look at the page and use these questions to kind of notice details that you wouldn't have before if you just kind of read through it. Okay? Just on page 83.
The panel order, I think is
Backgrounds are schematic.
Identify everything.
There's lots of things. I think the one like feel like
They're wearing black. Yeah. Turn to page 83. Well, they think we're like overlaps. Or maybe well, this cloud kind of like goes out of the panel. Maybe that's just like
Try to purge everything. Everything is there for a purpose.
Draw attention on.
Like abstract is
On the other piece, she's easy. No, but I'm just using that as a reference. Well, this one is the only one who's actually seen it.
And then their eyes are pointing towards you.
And this is also like one of the continuous beers.
You don't see them.
I think you put it together, that's all for it.
Actually see
Liam, are you looking?
I thought a birthday text for
Very thoughtful.
For like 2 minutes of it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So judging by the context clues from the collaborative of the houses, like I'd say this is a
Okay, about 30 more
They're
seconds.
like
It's almost like they're talking.
on the outskirts street. I guess the answer takes place on the outskirts street.
Where does your eye, which panel does your eye draw to as soon as you open the page? Yes.
I'll come down. I'll save your life.
Come on, Jin, let's go.
Stop hanging there.
Okay, yeah, on the select actual head, and I'm like, that's probably.
Why is that usually in the middle? I feel like you're kind of drawing this big panel first, and then just kind of like go back up and like go over what happened.
Okay, now I want you to take out a piece of paper. This is where you are going to outline. So take out a piece of paper. No. This is individual. One individual.
Oh, sorry, this is individual.
Okay, you are going to outline your commentary. Okay? Before you write it, you are going to outline your commentary.
Page 83.
Huh?
Page 83.
It was page 83.
That is the most. Oh, sorry.
Oh no,
On the way, let's move it.
I feel bad about myself.
Plus, it's just using your resources.
Okay, so
Yeah, I know.
okay, so when before you write your commentary, I would say the most important part is figuring out how you're going to divide up the paragraphs, right? So as you guys now have identified all the things on that page, how are ways that you can divide it? And if you guys remember the practice commentary, right? You guys can either divide it by panel, and then focus on each panel that way. Okay, if you feel that it's going to go in chronological order, you can divide it by technique. Maybe the coloring and the shading is one paragraph. Maybe the camera angle is the other paragraph. Okay, maybe the text and the dialogue, just kind of like how we did with Watchmen, could be another paragraph. But you need to figure out how you're divided, but based on what you have in front of you. So right now, you're going to write down how you are going to separate each paragraph. And again, there are different ways to do it, but you have to figure out what you have to work with and the best way to carve that out. Okay, so again, by technique, by panel, maybe even by theme, right? Where you're gonna focus on the father-son relationship, and then you know, the idea of intergenerational gap or something like that.
Are we gonna get a license for the literary license?
Commentary on
Oh, you mean the comment? Comment. Yeah, you can do that. If you haven't used it, you should have one.
I think I'm ready to go. That like